have about 15 minutes for Q&A. As I said at the top of the session, we're going to alternate between questions in the room and questions online. Are there any questions in the room? And if not, I'm happy to start us off. Please.
Yeah, I have a question for Ron. Yeah.
I can repeat your question too as well, just so that.
Yeah, so I was just looking, so like in the sample that you had, the Asian sample, I was just wondering if have you considered like the variation in the social cultural or like ethno-cultural variation among like Asian women? So because I saw that you had like a large sample of the different Asian women, like, have you considered that as a potential confounder in the study? Because ethnic social cultural wise or ethnic cultural wise.
I'm going to repeat the question in your answer, just so everyone can hear.
Yeah, so the question is around this consideration of the diversity. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's actually a really great question. Question is whether or not or how we consider this potential diverse experiences within this really big and broad term called Asian. And I think that's an excellent question. And in fact, we've had, even working on this analysis, we've had a lot of thoughts and sometimes debates were reflections on the ways we're coding these variables. And I do want to recognize Asian, even just I'm Chinese, and even within Chinese culture, there's so many different variations. It's definitely cannot be represented by this one big variable there. So I do want to recognize it is a really big limitation here. There definitely needs to be more studies that really focusing on the diversity, and oftentimes I think one of the almost methodological challenge we sometimes encounter when doing this kind of analysis is just the size of the sample, but I also think that shouldn't be an excuse. So I do recognize it is an issue that we should potentially look into and really address the highly diverse experiences within the Asian. Within the Asia team are, I would say, many of the participants likely are with the East Asian background, and with some other participants coming from other non-East Asian experiences. And I think even within East Asian, Chinese or Korean or Japanese, that's still big, broad too. So yeah, thanks for that question.
I'm going to turn to the virtual space. Do you have any questions in the virtual space? Not at the moment. Coming back to the room. Any questions in the room? So I wanted to ask about kind of building off of the incredible work by the Amplify project, whether you're doing a scoping review or you were working with empirical data yourself, what are the lessons we should take forward in terms of recruiting so-called hard to reach or marginalized and minoritized participants, whether that's kind of errors you saw in the literature you were reviewing in a scoping review, or lessons you learned in your own work, working with youth, with sex workers, with folks who experience over policing, with Indigenous folks, etc. Any thoughts on this kind of recruiting and creating safe research spaces for our participants?
I mean, I guess it's open to everybody, but I could,
open to everybody. Yes, please.
I've only been working with Aisha for about a year, but I think just the way that Aisha collects data is very different from any study that I've ever been a part of before. I mean, the CGSHE has this kind of like dedicated research center in the downtown east side that's like very, I would say, more accessible than sort of the more like corporate style office on Hornby. And even like at the office, like there's naloxone kits, there's snacks, there's like, we always have clothes in case people need it. And there's a sexual health nurse that's there. Someone's usually there most days. And I've never seen a research space that like also addresses kind of direct basic community needs. Like I've never seen this sort of like overlap where like, you know, people can just drop by if they need like clothes or like they want to pick up a fresh naloxone kit, but also like we collect data there, and it's very non-clinical and non sort of like traditional like, it's not in a hospital, it's not in an office, it's not on campus. And I think that that's so important. We often like ask people to come to with people. Yeah, I was like super blown away by your presentation and all of the stuff that you do. And yeah, like I think food is such an important thing, and often in research protocols, like we're not allowed to give people food, or especially if you're working in a hospital. So I think like that kind of consideration is so important, but just respecting people as people and that they're not just there for us to take kind of knowledge from them, I think is so important. But just making everything accessible, from like recruitment to data collection to analysis, and like making sure that we're not being exploitative and extractive. And I think, yeah, that's something that I see in Aisha that I haven't really seen coming from a different university before. Yeah.
Thanks, Emma. Anyone else on the panel have any thoughts about this question? Things that work, things that don't.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add one thing to the related to the experience collecting data with Aisha. I spent a lot of time this year working with our outreach team to collect some the cohort data with our participants who primarily working at massage parlors, and I want to share definitely sort of respecting their space, because we oftentimes coming into their work setting, oftentimes they are quite complex dynamics, and oftentimes folks are so busy with their work. I think that like respect, also honoring their workspace, making sure privacy is there, making sure we have sort of enough time to even sometimes might need take some time to wait for their finishing up a service, or have to leave and later come back. I think both respect their space and also that sort of flexibility could really help with the recruitment.
I just wanted to add as well, based kind of on your point about community really. Oh, sorry. Really spoke to me in my previous research experience, that idea of, I have a few different hats, and one of them is a researcher and one of them is an educator, and just being mindful that I'm coming into a community space, and how can I best accommodate and be respectful for the space that I am entering is so important. And I think back to when I worked in some communities in Northern Ontario, like the ideas of Northern Ontario, and respecting the French language that's used there, and just recognizing the diversity of community needs, and being there to help them and listen from them for what I can do to best support them.
Turning back to the room, any other questions that have stirred up while we've been having this chat? Andrea,
I would love to hear more about the exhibitions and the Amplify team. Like, that sounds really amazing, and I couldn't hear, like, can you talk a little bit more about both the one at the public library, and also specifically when does it start? It sounds like soon, right? Yeah, and maybe you can talk a little bit more how it ties in, and will it be at the main public library? And yeah, where will we find more information? When can we go?
So at the Vancouver Public Library, the exhibition will be on November 15th, and we can share this information with like CGSHE, with Altera. But yeah, so we're going to be doing an opening ceremony on the 8th floor in the downtown Vancouver Public Library location, and that's where we'll, have some of our participants, elders, research members, be able to talk and do a presentation, and possibly do a panel as well, to ask questions and kind of get a deeper dive into, the relationality between elders, participants, researchers, and how we all came and sat together and made moccasins together. And on the 9th floor, there will be a story work project by Milo, Ira, and they have kind of put the methodology that we talked about today in this beautiful piece of artwork. And so we're going to showcase that along with photos of the moccasins with our artist bios. And that will be up during the week of Rock Your Mocks, which Sasha had already said is like a international online event. So that will be up from the 15th to the 30th of November in Vancouver Public Library.
Also, can I add, please register?
Yes, yeah. So when we send the information.
There'll be a link.
Yeah.
There are 90 seats, so there's plenty of seats, but it's because it's a public event, we don't know how many people are gonna come, so please register, bring your friends and your family. It's a moment to really celebrate research participants, because oftentimes they're just people that are often without a name or anything attached to the work, and now you get to actually see their work and all of the fruits of their labor and the stories that have been woven into their artwork. And what's exciting, just to add on to what Chelsea is saying about the panel, we will be doing our panel with the research component, but we're also having the artists themselves, both the lead artist and a couple of what we now call the participant artists, who will be talking about their experiences as well. So it's something very new in research, and I'm really excited to see it unfold. But for ANCO, that one's going to be, the opening event will be for invite only. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is we didn't have a chance to talk about this in our Q&A. There's a select few participants that don't want to be identified. And so we wanted to be so thoughtful how we do this. So ANCO, we were hoping to have this invite only exhibition. So same thing, you still have your gallery, you still have the food and the panel and all of the exciting stuff, but still continuously thinking about how we can keep it safe. And so that's why that one's invite only. However, the exhibition is 6 months long, so you can always come and see it anytime in that 6 months.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions that have come in online? Any final questions in the room, including questions you might have for one another as panelists?
I have a question for us. So cool. How will you, like, the KT is amazing, but I know like funders and grants sometimes want to see like a policy report or like manuscripts or whatever. Like, how will you make that like such a non-traditional project? Then like, how will you publish a manuscript, and are there any like potential barriers you see like within the research publication structure that could like potentially be a challenge?
It's a great question.
Yeah, so we're currently writing 2 manuscripts. One is on the sharing circle, which will kind of look like a more traditional manuscript, so it shouldn't be too hard to publish that one, especially because it's really recommendations about like how to change healthcare systems to create safer spaces. The other one though is our methodology, and we really want to incorporate Milo's art into the manuscript and have it like work along with the method that we developed along with like the elders and participants, and really share that like process of gathering together to create this methodology. So that one might be a little harder to find a journal, but we're kind of more so looking for somewhere that will fit what we're doing, and we're not going to change it to fit into a journal. So we'll find it. Yeah.
With that, I'm just going to roll on in here and switch us to our final slide. Thank you so much to everybody for spending your afternoon with us. And that is the end of our symposium today.